Hi, we're going to start our new unit either this week or definitely by Friday. And our new unit is called What Factors Brought Settlers to Maryland? The function of this history lab is to synthesize, to make sense of the work we've already done, looking at the life in England circumstances that we've been kind of checking out since the start of the school year. We're going to take all that we've learned about their clothing, about their habits, about their living conditions, and begin to piece together the story of understanding the motivations behind why people would want to move away from England and move to this scary, uncharted new land. When you receive a new history lab, there's always going to be a front cover sheet. It's going to look like this. Your heading, I do expect to see a first and last name, the class number you arrive in, and we'll have our essential question, typically a picture, a brief introduction, and then a few other items that we'll be talking about. The intention behind this structure is to give you a chance to piece together the story one small part at a time. When you receive this lab, the introduction is going to give you a nice brief overview of what it is you're going to be learning, how it connects to broader themes, and what types of investigatory material you're going to use. So when you're curious, what are we going to be doing? This is your opportunity to kind of check it out. A lot of times you will want to know what the purpose is of my instruction. Like, why are we learning about this? What's the purpose? What are we doing? And it's laid out here for you on every single lab. My goal as a history teacher in middle school is to provide you with the tools and skills you need to be a successful civics student in 9th grade and a successful global citizen as you progress through high school and beyond. So, also within the first couple of pages are the objectives and a list of the standards that this entire packet is going to be targeting. So identifying authors of sources, reconstructing the literal meaning of a historical passage, these very essential skills of a emerging historian. The first piece of evidence that you're going to be reviewing in all of our history labs is going to be called a topic background essay. The topic background essay is typically a high-achieving, beyond the regular expectation of an 8th grade writer, but it was created by an 8th grader. So this essay was drafted in 2014 by another student who currently, I think, is either finishing their senior year or starting their freshman year of college. But once upon a time, they were, in fact, an 8th grade history student of mine, and they were able to create this essay. So your goal, and you need to, follow the protocols, you're going to read the entire essay, underline, circle any words you don't understand, and you're going to read it all before you get to your comprehension questions. Being able to answer the comprehension questions is going to be essential for you to communicate to me that you understand what the essay is about. It's one of those standards that I'm looking for. I'm checking for your understanding. The structure of these comprehension questions is pretty easy. They start out real simple, and then they get progressively harder, so that by the 5th one, you need to, do some thinking. To give you an example of what I'm talking about, the question I ask you first is, what impacted the development of colonial Maryland? You'll notice I've got 2 lines for you, so I am looking for a complete sentence. Well, real fun trick, after you've read the entire essay and you've gotten to the questions, you're going to go back to the beginning and you're going to look for the language that says, impacted the development of colonial Maryland. But what impacted the development of colonial Maryland? And the answer, of course, is going to be the beginning part of that complete sentence. The forces of social and economic change happening or transpiring in England and the New World during the 17th and 18th centuries is the thing that impacted colonial development. So each of these answers is going to be found within the context of what you're reading about. No tricky business until we get to the fifth question. The fifth one is it's going to be your thinker. It's going to be the question that you're probably going to spend the most amount of time on. So this example is, if 74% of Maryland's immigrant arrivals came against their will, then 26% came voluntarily. They came because they wanted to. And I want to know what you think would be true about this relationship, about this dynamic. If you think about it, for every 4 people you see, 3 people are going to be in Maryland because they don't want to be there. Only 1 person is going to be walking around feeling good about themselves. So if 75% roughly of the population is there and unhappy, what do you think those kind of, interpersonal exchanges are going to be like? What is life going to be like in Maryland for that 75%? And how is it going to impact how that 25% feel? So again, 74% arrive because they don't want to, 26 arrive because they want to. How does that dynamic have an impact here? And I want to know what you're thinking. There's more space. I want to know more about your thoughts. All right, the next piece you're going to see is a couple of pages of content-specific vocabulary. By the end of 8th grade, you are going to have about 2,000 new words in your vocabulary register that you can call upon. You are going to have to use these unit-specific words in any writing piece you produce for me. So in writing responses, in presentations, in speeches, in all of this, you have to use a sampling of these content-specific words. It shows that you have that flexibility to transfer one skill of acquiring new knowledge and new words to then using them properly and in the correct context. It's really important. There's also Old English vocabulary. Now, these are going to look super weird. They're going to sound very strange. They might even come across as, offensive, like heathen. However, these words are specific to the historical time that we're learning about. We need to know what the words are and what they mean so that we can better understand the people of the time and what they were talking about. So they're kind of like clues to give us a little bit more insight. All right, so let's talk a little bit about these primary sources. Within each history lab, you are going to receive a smattering, a nice example collection of documents, of pictures, of paintings, of letters that you're going to interact with. You're going to read the original language. I'll give you a modern translation, or I'll ask you to develop one. But that just helps me help you see where you're at with your understanding of that primary source. I hope that makes sense. So this is the Charter of Maryland, and we know from looking at the vocabulary list above that a charter is a legal document that explains what the goals and expectations are. Okay, it's a legal document. The original language of the Charter of Maryland is in this fun, fancy writing here. If you want to, you are welcome to change the font style so you can read it better. But the gist of it is going to be the same, okay? Modern translation. So this says, our beloved and trustworthy citizen, Cecil Calvert, Baron of Baltimore, from Ireland, and the son of the deceased George Calvert, the former Baron of Baltimore, is following in his father's footsteps and enthusiastically wants to spread the Christian religion and the British Empire. He has asked for permission to go to the New World. He plans on transporting, through his own efforts and expense, many British colonists to a part of America that has not yet been farmed and is partially occupied by Indians that do not know about the Christian God. The king grants the whole area of this new colony, with a few exceptions stated by the British government, to Cecil Calvert and his heirs. When you read this, it basically means everything that I just read to you. So if this is too tricky, we've got this to go off of. So now we need to do some document analysis. The subject, this is a modified version, it's going to help you out later. The subject of this charter is what? What is the purpose of this document? Well, the subject is the establishment of the Maryland colony and the role of Cecil Calvert. What's the occasion? The occasion is going to include our date. And we know that it's 1632 because it says so right there. Audience. Who is the intended audience of this document? Well, obviously, I'm not going to wait for you to answer me because this is, in fact, a video. But the audience should be, the first thing that comes to your mind ought to be Cecil Calvert himself and the settlers, and the settlers of Maryland. The purpose. What is the intention of this document? What's the purpose of the Maryland Charter? Well, it's kind of, simple and straightforward. The purpose of this charter is to establish Cecil Calvert as the leader of the colony based upon his role and status in Ireland and England. Okay. It also says up here that he's going to go, he asked for permission to go to the New World. He plans on transporting, moving by himself and paying for it, colonists to this new unfarmed area that's partially occupied by Indians that don't yet know the Christian God. He's following in his father's footsteps and enthusiastically wants to spread the Christian religion. So the purpose of this is to also announce that Cecil Calvert intends to convert Indians to Christianity. Okay? Source type is going to be a little bit tricky. It's either going to be a primary source or a secondary source. That's it. So your source type is going to be primary or secondary. A primary source is one that was created at the time of the historic event. A secondary source is going to be an item created after the fact. So a primary source would be a letter, a diary entry, a newspaper article. A secondary source would be a movie about the event. So Pearl Harbor actually happened in 1942. Primary sources of Pearl Harbor examples would be photographs that appeared in newspapers, newspaper released articles, radio broadcasts that happened. The secondary source would be the movie created by Hollywood in the early 2000s called Pearl Harbor. So based on that distinction, we know that this document written in 1632 is primary. It took a long time to say, but I hope you get it. All right, then the last thing we consider is tone. What is the attitude that's being expressed in this charter? Well, it's really not, it's not angry, it's not terse, it's just simply matter of fact. It's intentional, meaning that it has a simple purpose. Okay? So that's how